Hello, so today we are going to solve day 5 of Advent of Code. So what the problem today says is that we have, I'll skip again the detailed description, but essentially what it means is basically we have a stack of crates, sort of, and they are numbered like this, 1, 2, 3. It's a stack like this, and we want to move. So this is the input, and we get the instructions which tell us to move how many from which row to which row. So here it tells us to move 1 from 2, so from here the second one to 1. So we want to move one item, so let's say D, the top one, from 2 to 1, so from this one to 1. Okay, so if we do that, we end up with this. And then the second one says moving 3 items from 1 to 3. So from 1 to 3, and we move them like a stack. D first, and second, Z second, so we end up with this. And then the third one tells us to move 2 from 2 to 1. So we move 2 from 2 to 1. Yeah, so we move 2 MC from 2 to 1. So C first, and then M. So we end up with this. And then the last one tells us to move 1 from 1 to 2. Okay, 1 from 1 to 2. So we move M here. And then the result that we want to return is the concatenation of the top letters, right? So that would be CMZ. Okay, so that's the problem. And we'll get, of course, a bigger input. So, for example, I have it here in day5.txt. So this is the input. So we get the initial setup with the numbers, and then we get the move instructions. They are separated by a new line. Okay, so that's the problem. Now let's see how we can solve it. Okay, let me just make this bigger. So first we of course need to get the input file. This is going to be opening day5.txt and then R, right, for reading. And now we need to separate the stack from the move instructions. So we can just double line. The first line is going from here to here, the second line going from here to here, right? And so we take the input file, we read it, and then we split it by double line. So that would be a double line like this, and this will give us, the first one is the stack, the second one is the moves. Okay, just 2, right? And now we want to get the values in each of these stacks. So I'll just create it's initially empty list, and we will fill it using this stack value here. And we have, you can see here we have up to 9. So I'll just have 10 here so that we can fill everything in. Okay, so now to get each line of these, right, each of these lines, the only way we can parse is to get each line separately. So to do that, we will just go through line by line. So we will get this stack, which is the entire thing, and split it by line. So it would be stack that split by new line. Okay. And now we get each line, and so we want to fill this stack here. Okay. And you can see one thing is that we want to get each one. This one needs to go in stack 1. This one needs to go in stack 1. This one is to go in stack 1. So how do we do that when we have just the line like this? Well, what we can do, we know that, what's the length actually of this? So it's 1, 2, 3, and then the space, right? And then the second one starts. So we can just go through each line with 4 character, and that will give us everything, including the space, right? And that will give us this, and then we'll put this in line 1, and then we go again, we'll put the next one in line 2, and that's how we will construct the stack like this. Okay, and so to do that, we'll go through for I in range starting from 0 to the length of the line, and each time we go 4, right, because we want 4, and then the next 4, then the next 4, right, regardless if it's a space or if it has a value, right? Okay, now if it's space, we don't want to add it to the stack because of this stack, right, because it's a space. So how do we check if it's a space or not? We can just check that it contains open bracket or end bracket, whichever one you want, right? So we will check if it contains So what is the thing we are looking at? It's 4 of this line. And so it's just line from I to I plus 4, right? Let's call it C. Okay, so this will give us the 4 things, and we want to just check if it's a letter, has a letter or not. And one thing to note is that since the problem asks us to give us just the top letters, we don't need to keep track of the brackets. We just need to keep track of the letter. And so the letter, since this is position 0 is the open bracket, the letter would be at position 1, right? And so we'll just get the letter at position 1. So that would be C at position 1. But where do we add it? We want to add it to the stack. But how do we determine which stack, right? So these are blocks of 4, right? So to determine which stack, we can just divide by 4, right? Because for the first one, by the way, we'll index starting from 0, right? So for the first one, it would be I equal to 0, so we'll divide it by 4, that will give us 0. For the second one, okay, since we have 0, it would be 5. 5 divided by 0, that will give us 1 for the next one, and we can keep going, but dividing by 4 will give us the index here, right? And so that's what we'll do here. So to give us the index of the stack, we can just use I divided by 4, that will give us the index, and we want to add just this character, right? And so we'll start with the top one. So for the first one, top one has nothing, but for the second one, it has G, so we'll add G first. So you can also see here that what will happen is that we'll, for the stack at position 0, we'll first add G, then add J, then add W. So you can see it's sort of in the reverse order of a stack. Just keep that in mind because we will need to reverse later. Okay, so now let's just print, let's call it before, and let's call it stack, just to see what we have. Now, just to make this easier, because this example is too long, I have here the example in the description, so that's what we'll use here. So let's print just that. Okay, so you can see here we have, sorry, this is not, yeah, we need to change this to example 5 so that we can get the right thing. Okay, so you can see the first one would have NZ, right? It's reversed order, and then we'd have DCM. M is at the top, and then P, right? So it's parsing correctly, except it's in the reverse order than what we wish to do here, because we want to be able to get the top, okay? So what we'll do here is we'll do just one pass to reverse them, so in range of length of stacks, right? And then we'll just pick the stack at position I, and we will get we'll reverse it, right? Okay, so now that we have it reversed, let's just print it so we can make sure we have the right thing. Okay, so now you can see before is like this, and now it's in the right thing that we want, where N is the top one, so we can pop it easily with these for these moves, right? Okay, so now we need to execute the moves. So for each move, they are separated by a line, so we can just do moves.split. Okay. Now, how do we get these numbers? We can easily do that with a regular expression that just gets us the numbers, right? And so to do that, we can just use regex in Python. So that's, we want to find all the numbers. So to do that, we can just say a set of numbers for each move, right? Okay, so let's see what this gives us first. Okay. We need to import it, of course. Find all. Okay. Okay, so that gives us the numbers that we want each time. So 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, right? So now we just need to convert these to integers. So int of x for x is in this. Okay, so that gives us the values that we look for. But the values are just 3. The first one is the count. The second one is the from. Let's call it from I. And the last one is the one we are moving to, so to j. Okay. Now, there is only one thing, is because here I'm indexing starting from 0. And these would be in starting from 1. So we just need to adjust that to make them start from 1, right? Okay, why is this? Okay, so yeah, there's an extra bracket. Okay, so we need to just change the indexing, adapt the indexing. So let's just subtract -1 to get the right index that we expect. Okay, so now what we want for each move, we want to keep popping count times, right? So for the first one, we want to pop once from the from and put it in 2. For this one, we want to pop 3 times, right? So while count, and of course, we want to make sure from I still contains value so that we don't pop from an empty list. What we'll do is, well, of course, once we pop, we want to do -1, okay? But what we want to do is add to the stack we are moving to, we want to add the top elements from this stack. And so to do that, we can just pop. Okay. And this should be it. So let's just see what do we get in our stack after that in this example. So what we expect to get is this last one here. Okay. So let's see if we get that. So the after CM, which is right, and then the third one has PD and Z. So it's working properly, right? And now we just need to get the top thing. So how do we get it? So top is equal to empty first, and now we just go through the stacks and we get the top one. Okay, so for S in stacks, we want to get the top one. And of course, only if there is other values, right? For these that don't have any values, we want to skip them. Okay, so only if it has value in Python, we can just check if S. You can just also check the length. We want to do top plus S. Top one is -1, is the last one in the list, right? And then that's what we want to print at the end, which is top. Okay, so let's just make sure this is working. It's CMZ, which is it what we expect? Yes, it is what we expect. Okay, so now let's just comment this and let's run it for the bigger example, which is day 5 here. Okay, so now if we run it, we get this. Let's just make sure it's the right one, and it is the correct one, right? Okay, so now let's go to part 2. So part 2 says that we want, it's a different crate mover. So instead of moving the top one by one, we want to just move all of them at once, right? So for example, here, moving a single crate is still the same, but let's say, for example, here, we want to move these D and Z. We want to move 3 from 1 to 3. So we just move them in the same order. So D and Z just becomes D and Z on top of P, right? So basically it doesn't move from the top. So the top one doesn't become the bottom one, right? It just moves all of them together. So that's where we want to change it. So how do we do this? Let's do part 2 here. And so for part 2, again, we want the same moves. So we want the same thing here. But one thing is, before changing the stacks that we did here, we want to copy the stacks so that we can reuse them in part 2. Okay, so let's just copy them before we execute the moves. Let me move this. So let's call them original stacks, right? And so since it's a nested list, we want to use deep copy to copy it. Okay, so we copy stacks before executing the moves for the first crate mover, right? And now what we want to do is we just want to move the last count as they are from one to the other, right? So to do that, we want to move from 2i to 2j. We want to add, just append to the end, the exact same ones. But we want from the end, so we need to use n minus count, right? Because let's say we want to move the last 3 from a crate that has, let's say, maybe 6 elements, right? What this tells us is we just want to move the last 3 from to 2 to the destination stack, right? So to get that, we just need to use n minus count, right? And so that's what we'll do here. So we'll say original stacks from, we want to just get the n minus count up to the end. In Python, this would be up to the end. If you wish, you can use up to n, right? And what is n? N is just the length of this from stack, right? So let's just call it n is equal to the length of this. Okay. Okay, so we move it. Now, one thing we should not forget is once we copy them, so here we just move them, copy them to here. We want to remove them from the original from stack as well. So to do that, we can just say that this is now equal to this, but up to n minus count, right? From 0 to n minus count, because the last count moves to I and needs to be removed from this initial one, right? And that's pretty much it. 0 here can be omitted. And now we can do the same thing to get the top again. But we want to get it from the original stack instead. Okay? And let's run this. Let's run it first on the example just to make sure we have it right. So if we run it first on the example, we get MCD. Let's make sure that's working properly. And that's working properly here. And now let's just run it on the big example. So day 5, and let's run it. We get this. Let's just verify that it's the proper one. And it is. Cool. Okay. So that's, yeah, so that works properly. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think the tricky part a little bit is figuring out the parsing, but once we have it, it should be easy to do. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this problem. Please like and subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.